Hey everyone, I've got a little story to tell you. It's a Bigfoot story, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's never been reported. About 10 or 12 years ago, I friended a person who I was friends with when I was a young boy, teenager, and we were very good friends, if not best friends, up until we were about 17 or 18 years old. But we went to church together. And anyways, so about 12 years ago, I friended him on Facebook. He lives up in Nebraska. His name is Bryan. And he saw all my Bigfoot stuff. And I've never been shy about talking about, what I've seen and experienced. So he told me that his mother has always said that she saw one back in the late 60s or 1970 up in Idaho. So, the story from Bryan was, and his mom's name is Christine. His dad's name is Garland, and he has a little sister who at the time of this sighting hadn't been born yet, and her name is Lisa. So Bryan told me that his mom, has always said that she saw one, and he'd put me in contact with her. And I remember spending the night at Bryan's house. He lived in Kansas City, and I live here in Leavenworth. And so, we'd go church basketball, church events, things like that, youth events. We'd go do all that kind of stuff together, picnics and things. So we'd spent a lot of time together. And so I've spent the night at his house a few times. And so, I knew his mother and father, so super nice people. Anyway, so he put me in contact with his mom, Christine, and she told me the whole story on the phone. Of course, I told her my story, of the two that I saw at the park, because I wanted her to be comfortable knowing that, I had the same experiences. And so she didn't have to keep any of the information, she didn't have to be timid about what she was going to reveal to me, because I was truly a believer. Anyways, so this is what her version of her story told to me. This is how I remember it. She said that her husband Garland had family up outside of Challis, Idaho, that owned some land and had a cabin. And they were up there vacationing. My friend Bryan, who's very close to my age, was 3 years old at the time. So, this was probably 1970. And I'm 57. So, we're talking 53 years ago, 52, 53 years ago. So Christine was in her 20s, blonde hair, very lovely lady. Garland, very big, kind of a large, imposing man. And then they had Bryan, who was 3 years old at the time. Well, they were on this family property outside of Challis in the mountains there, and there was either a spring or a stream. I believe she said Garland and Bryan were fishing, and in a stream, and they were kind of moving on upstream or downstream, whichever direction. I'm not sure, upstream or downstream, but they were kind of moving away, continually looking for new pools to fish into. And Garland and Bryan, who was 3 at the time, wasn't doing much fishing. He was more throwing rocks, exploring, turning over rocks, checking things out, making splashing, doing all kinds of stuff that you would expect a 3-year-old boy to be doing. And Christine said that she had her back she was up on the bank of the creek where the wood line starts, with her back either against a tree or against the wood line. I'm not exactly sure the exact details of that, but so she's just watching Garland and Bryan fishing and, doing what they do, and she heard a slight noise. And she looked to her left, and she said right there around the tree, parting some shrubs or a bush, or parting it in a way that it was poking its head through to look, was a Bigfoot, within 3 foot of her. And it looked at her, she looked at it. and I'm sure a very shocked, incredulous look on her face. And she said, it blinked, she blinked, it blinked, and she took off running. And as she described it to me, and believe me, she told it, she was able to laugh a little bit about it, because she said, my God, Randy, I left Garland and Bryan there to die. She said, I just took off running. She said, I went through the creek, and she said, I had to get back to the cabin. So she was beelining it back to the cabin, and she said she didn't even warn Garland. And she said, I was so scared that I left him to fend for himself, which, of course, in retrospect, that's not what you would think that you would do, but terror does a thing to you also. You never know how you're going to respond to terror. And she said that this thing, she said it was somewhere between a man and a gorilla. It's what its face looked like. The hair was reddish. And of course, there's no way in that brief amount of time and terror involved that, you could say that it was male or female or whatever. But, indications are probably that it was a male, maybe even a young male, who knows. But the thing is, for me, I talked with her daughter, Lisa, over the last week, who we became friends on Facebook. And she's, of course, interested in the Bigfoot subject because of her mother's encounter there. And so I spoke with Lisa quite a bit, and I wanted to see if her mother would actually do an interview for me so that I could put her mother saying it in her own words. She's now in her mid-70s, maybe later than that, but somewhere in her 70s. And she wasn't interested. Not interested in having her face on a video and her telling the story. She's had to deal with a little bit of ridicule, even amongst their own family, who just doesn't believe that that's what she saw. And even her husband Garland, who Lisa, the daughter, believes that he really believes her, but initially he was trying to soothe her by saying, "Oh, you probably saw a bear," and that's something that anybody would say to try to bring down the excitement level, the fear level, that, hey, you just probably saw a bear, and it's probably just as scared of you as you were, calm down or whatever. But she's always held firm that what she saw is what she saw. And and Lisa, Garland has since passed away, but she believes that Garland believed her, and that's always comforting to know, that at least within your own immediate family, you've got, people that know that you're not telling a lie. Well, anyways, so this was right outside of Challis. She told me that many years ago, the land was bought up by a mining company. She says she doesn't know if it's still owned by the same mining company, but all that land in that area was purchased by a mining company that may be up there mining stuff or whatever. Who knows? I don't know the exact location, but I do know, because of her encounter a few years after her telling me that story, I found my way up in there outside of Challis on my way to Washington and Oregon, and I stayed in a place called Bay Horse. It was a long road south and southwest of Challis. Went back into two lakes called Bay Horse, Big Bay Horse Lake and Little Bay Horse Lake. So I went into the Little Bay Horse area, and there was nobody there, but there was a little dock, an old wooden rickety dock where a couple of people were sitting there fishing. And so I pulled my truck in there, found a camp spot, and just started setting my stuff up. And one of the fishermen got up and walked around this very small lake. Maybe a big pond is more likely you'd call it, a big pond rather than a small lake. But he walked around and went up this trail that kind of went up between two ridges with trees on both sides as the trail went up the ridge. And immediately as he's walking up that trail, I hear a couple of knocks come out of the woods on the right of that trail. And so I'm looking over at the guy on the dock, and he's just sitting there with his pole in the water, and he's not moving at all. But I still walk over and I said, hey, I said, were you just in your tackle box? Did you close up or open your tackle box? Because it almost sounded like a tackle box closing and the lids and the buckles being popped closed, where they'll snap. That's what I heard knocks coming out of the wood line over there. And he goes, no. I said, did you hear those knocks? And he goes, yeah. I said, where did you hear them from? And he pointed to the right. He said, well, I said, from those woods over there. And so I don't know if he had Bigfoot on the mind. I didn't discuss anything. I just asked him what he heard. Wanted to make sure that I wasn't mishearing his tackle box, but I clearly heard some knocks in an area that somebody was just walking up a trail. But I did ask him, I said, where does that trail lead? And he said, well, that leads up to the Big Bay Horse Lake. And he said, that's where we're camping. It's about a half a mile walk from there down that trail to here. And so we were just down here fishing, but so I ended up staying there by myself that night and didn't have anything happen. No more knocks, no visitor, no camp visitors or anything like that. But it was still interesting to hear the knocks when it happened, at the time it happened, and then get confirmation from that other fisherman that he heard it also. And that was not too far from Challis, Idaho, where Christine's story took place, also outside of Challis. So very, very good area. I mean, I of course encourage anyone to go there. If you ever, got to put things on your bucket list. You got to experience them. But yeah, very interesting story.